So glucose and insulin have a very, very close relationship. And when glucose is going up, then insulin will go up. I want you to understand why this is important. If you're talking to your friends and you're telling them about how glucose is affecting insulin resistance and insulin, why does this matter? Well, let's put the glucose away for just a moment, but we're going to come back to glucose in just a few moments, and let's just talk about insulin. Insulin, when it is elevated, plays into insulin resistance. There is no such thing as insulin resistance and all of the problems that it causes if there isn't also elevated insulin. These two things always come together. Now, as I have given some talks for Unicity, which I always love, I have been interested to see how you are interested in the connection between insulin resistance and depression. This is a very, very delicate topic, but it is very important for you to know that there is a lot of scientific evidence suggesting that in some instances, depression has a connection, which is insulin resistance. And I wanted to just take a moment and make sure you were aware of how that happens. So that if you mention this to your friends, then your friend will say, well, how is depression connected to insulin resistance? Now you can answer them. So the brain, you can see my brain very well because I have nothing covering it. The brain has a very high metabolic rate. It is very hungry. Hopefully your brains are very hungry right now because you're listening and learning so much. But the brain always wants to pull in energy. And one of those energy sources is glucose. So glucose is fueling the brain. The brain is like an engine and it just keeps running. It needs lots of fuel. Insulin opens the door to allow the glucose to come in. And so when the brain is getting very hungry and it wants glucose among its fuels, it needs insulin to help the glucose come in. But what happens when insulin isn't working very well? What happens when the brain becomes insulin resistant? Now the brain can't get enough of its energy from the glucose. So the glucose coming in to fuel the brain isn't working very well. The brain starts to go very hungry. Its energy use starts to go down. And in some people, that manifests or that causes depression. In other people, it may cause migraine headaches. In other people, it may cause a forgetful mind or something like early stage Alzheimer's disease. These seem like different diseases, but they have one thing in common. The brain is going hungry because insulin isn't working well. In other words, the brain has become insulin resistant. Now, if you've been telling this to your friend may say, well, where does insulin resistance come from? You need to know where it comes from in order to explain this to them. The most common cause of insulin resistance is too much insulin. It's almost like when we are hearing a loud sound for so long, we start to become deaf to that sound. We don't hear it as well anymore. When the body has been so loaded with insulin for so long, the body stops listening. It becomes like a naughty little child. And I know a lot about that because I have 3 of them at home. So too much insulin causes insulin resistance. As one goes up, so too does the other. Now, if too much insulin causes insulin resistance, now your friend may say, well, where does all of that insulin come from? Why does my body have so much insulin? And this brings us back to glucose. Let's look at what happens when a person eats fat or protein or carbohydrate. Those are the 3 macronutrients. And in English, that word macro means big. They're the big parts of the diet. So you teach your friend about the macronutrients, fats, proteins, and carbohydrate. And then you tell them, when a person eats fat, there will be no insulin response. When a person eats protein, there may be a small response, but it's generally quite modest. But when a person eats pure carbohydrate, Then all of a sudden, insulin goes up by 10 times, and even at its fastest, it'll take 3 hours before it comes back down to normal. So that matters. It matters even more because when you look globally at the amount of what people eat, over 70% of all calories worldwide come from carbohydrates. And usually this is refined carbohydrates, so sugars and refined starches. So not only are we eating most carbohydrate, but that also happens to be the one thing that keeps insulin the highest. Now, I'm not done talking about carbohydrates because they can become a problem. In our bodies, when we eat glucose, at any moment, we have only about 1 teaspoon, just 4 grams of glucose in our entire body. That is in our blood. We only have 4 grams of glucose in our blood. That is very, very little. But then what happens if we go eat a chocolate bar? We go eat some candy. A normal chocolate bar has 10 times more glucose in it than in my entire blood. If I take all of that glucose into my body, that will increase my blood glucose so much that if it stays high, I would die. It just from the sugar in one chocolate bar, one candy bar, it will increase the glucose level so much that it would make a person die. And so we cannot keep the blood glucose levels so high. And we have someone who can come and help. If blood glucose is going up, remember there's a hormone that can come from the pancreas to help the blood glucose come down. Do you remember the name of the hormone? Yes, it's insulin. So insulin now is a hero. It's a savior. In this role, insulin is saving our lives by not letting our blood sugar or blood glucose be too high for too long. So the glucose starts to come up, insulin will come up, and it will act to push the glucose down. Remember, because it opens doors and allows the glucose to come out of the blood. And so it saves us. However, this can happen too often, too much. So you'll remember, most people, the average global diet is over 70% carbohydrates. And so when you keep eating and your glucose goes up and the insulin's coming up, then insulin resistance starts to follow. So a person eats glucose, insulin goes up. They eat more glucose, insulin goes up even higher. They need more and more insulin, and they get more and more insulin resistant. Okay, so far I have been talking a lot about insulin and insulin resistance. I worry that you might be getting a little tired of insulin. So for the first time ever, in any Unicity talk I've ever given, aren't you so lucky? For the first time ever, I want to talk about some of the specific effects of glucose. What I've been talking about so far is that glucose only matters because it pushes up insulin. But that's not entirely true. Not that I've been tricking you. That's all true and very important. But it's also important for you to understand another effect of too much glucose. Because yes, too much glucose causes too much insulin, which causes insulin resistance. But also, glucose has this ability to be kind of sticky. When glucose is too high, it will start binding. It will stick to various molecules in the body, including proteins. And when glucose gets stuck to something like a protein, it starts to damage whatever it is stuck to. It messes up the shape. And now this thing, in this case, the protein was going to go through my blood and do something important. When glucose comes and binds on it and sticks onto it, now it can't. So when glucose binds, this is a process that is called glycation. This is a new word for some of you, but it's something I want you to remember so that when you go talk to your friends about the metabolic storm, I want you to be able to talk about insulin resistance. Now I also want you to talk about the problems of glycation. And glycation happens not only in proteins, It also can happen at fats. It can happen at DNA. Within the nucleus, I'm sorry translators, within the nucleus of the cells, the glycation can damage DNA and cause mutations. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Professor Bickman is being a little dramatic. Let me just help you understand how relevant this is. And never forget insulin resistance, but now we've added to the story. Because when the cells of the brain start to get too much glucose and they get glycated, they suffer. The heart can suffer. The kidneys can suffer. Even our bones can suffer. But when the brain experiences too much glycation, brain problems happen, including Alzheimer's disease. So there is substantial evidence to show that Alzheimer's disease is partly a consequence of too much glucose. And the glucose is getting stuck, it's getting sticky, and it is damaging the brain's ability to function. Now, what about the heart? When the heart muscle starts to get too much glucose binding to it, it directly damages the muscle, causing heart disease. In fact, the problem goes even further when it comes to the heart, because the blood vessels, if we look at the blood vessels in a person, the blood vessels start to have some glycation as well. And then the blood vessels get damaged. And then you start to have things like atherosclerosis and other problems. So more heart disease. Now what about the kidneys? The kidneys actually, as from a metabolic scientist, it's interesting to note that they actually have the highest metabolic rate of any part of the body. But when there's too much glucose coming to the kidneys, they get damaged. And now the person has kidney disease. And even the bones, when the bones and all their proteins start to have glycation, now the person starts to have osteoarthritis, where the bones start to get weaker and more and more fragile. This fly wants to learn about insulin resistance. Pesky fly. It's a good student. He just wants to learn. I can't blame him. Okay, now, you look at these tissues, the brain, you look at the heart, the bones, and it's easy for us to think, well, that's okay, because I can't see those. What we can see is the skin. Now, I know many of you are very interested in looking good. I don't care as much as I used to. When you're a freckled old man, it's okay to not look good. But some people want to look good. Yeah, I do too. I want to look good. But even on the skin, with all of the proteins and the collagen of the skin, there's evidence to show that when the skin has too much glycation, it starts to cause the wrinkles on the skin. So this could make someone start to look much older. So as the glucose levels are higher and higher, it starts to make more and more glycation, and then the person starts to get more wrinkled and begin to look older than they are. None of us want that. We want to look young. And so we want to control our glucose to control our glycation. So we have all of these tissues, the skin, the brain, the heart, and many, many more. All of them start to suffer when glycation starts to go up. But there's one other cell, and it's actually the most famous of all of them, that experiences some glycation, and that is the red blood cell. So the reason our blood is red is because of the red blood cells. And within the red blood cells, there is this complex structure, these proteins that we call hemoglobin. And hemoglobin its most famous job is to carry oxygen. So when I am taking a breath, I'm pulling in the oxygen. How do I get that oxygen to my muscles, to my heart? It's because the blood cells will take that oxygen and bind it. And it will carry the oxygen down to wherever I need it, down to my muscles, everywhere it needs to go. However, when the hemoglobin has had glycation, now it doesn't fit the oxygen very well. So now our red blood cells, whose most important job is to carry oxygen, they can't carry the oxygen as well as they used to. That is a big problem. This is something that is called hemoglobin A1C, or HbA1c. That is a percent or a number that reflects how much glycation do I have on my red blood cells. And that is a number that we can use to say, how much glycation do I have in my entire body? You cannot measure the glycation in your brain. You cannot measure the glycation in your heart. But you can measure the glycation in your red blood cells. Have some of you ever had your HbA1c measured? I bet you have. It's a very common measurement, and it's a good measurement of glycation. Now, I want you to pay attention to this, because here I have the blessing, I'm such a lucky professor, to speak to students from around the world. And so I wanted to understand, how do people around the world have different levels of HbA1c, or hemoglobin glycation? Now, before I mention that, I want to mention the numbers. So usually, HbA1c is presented as a percent. How much of my red blood cells, what percent of my red blood cells has undergone glycation? And if you can see these cutoffs, a good range is considered anything from 4% up to the mid 5%. And then we go up higher to the mid 6s, and that is usually considered the cutoff. If someone has an HbA1c that is 6.5% or higher, then we say they have type 2 diabetes. They have diabetes. We want it to be lower than that. Now, this has me come back to my point from a moment ago. We have so many people from so many beautiful countries. How are different people affected by HbA1c? So I was able to find multiple studies that compared these distinct populations: Europeans, Latinos, Asians, African, and then Arabic populations. All compared to European populations, all the same. Imagine if we had these 5 people and they were all the same body size, same height, same weight. If we control for all of those variables, if you compare the European to the average Latino will have about 0.1% higher. Now, what if we then go on to the average Asian? This is, in these studies, both East Asian and Southeast Asian. Then it's almost a quarter point higher on average. And that's about the same in African populations as well. And then the highest, Arabic populations, a full 0.5% higher. Even when it's the same body type. These aren't people who are any chubbier, they're the same body, and yet the percent goes higher and higher and higher. So this is a very big problem. In fact, a very big problem, particularly here in Asia and Southeast Asia, because some populations, it seems, that in a European population, they can have normal glucose, but they need more insulin to do it. In some Asian populations, they cannot make enough insulin. The beta cells cannot make enough insulin. And so the insulin actually stays too low. So in that person, it might not be so much a problem of insulin resistance, but a problem of very high glucose. Because there's not enough insulin to help bring the glucose down. So that could be why there's more glycation in Asian populations. Now, one of the problems of glycation that brings us back to insulin resistance is that more glycation leads to more inflammation. And when inflammation goes up, now insulin resistance also happens. So once again, even with glycation, we come back to insulin resistance, but the glycation itself is a separate problem that I want you to know. As my students, as you go become teachers to someone else, you talk about these two problems. Now, so far, I hope you've been paying attention. I hope you are awake. Unlike my normal students at my university who want to sleep through all of my lectures, how can I talk about this? One reason I've been presenting the questions is because I want you to anticipate the questions your friends may have. But also, I want you, your homework, as your professor, I'm assigning you some homework. I want you to go, when you leave here, call your friend or your family. I want you to teach them what you've learned. You're going to teach them about the metabolic storm. Too much insulin causing insulin resistance. Too much glucose causing glycation. These twin problems coming together and creating a storm. And then your friend is going to be a little scared. And they're going to say, well, what can I do to feel great? How can I stop these problems? And then you say, I have something that can help you. Now we get into the good news. As much as I've been lecturing you for several minutes, you may be thinking, boy, this is very depressing. I feel depression now. But here's the happy part, because this is a scary story. The metabolic problem is very scary, but it has a very happy ending. Okay, so too much insulin is contributing to insulin resistance. Too much glucose is contributing to glycation. Too much insulin and too much glucose are what's causing the problem. And so the solution is very simple. We just have to turn them around and bring them down. So you tell your friend, too much insulin, too much glucose. Your friend asks, what can I do? We need to bring them down. And you say there are two very easy ways, from a metabolic scientist, two easy ways to do this. Balance blood glucose by changing food and taking advantage of some effective tools. And then second, helping your friend learn how to fast more frequently. Now let's talk about the first one, balancing blood glucose. One way you can help your friend learn to balance blood glucose is to focus on fiber. Because when a human eats glucose, I already showed you what happens to insulin. Insulin goes up very, very high. It takes a long time to come down. However, if that glucose is matched with fiber, now all of a sudden you took that very, very high curve and you pushed it down. They still ate the same food, but by just matching that food with some glucose, with some good fiber, then they can bring the blood glucose down. Now your friend may say, well, that sounds wonderful, but I don't know how to get good fiber because not all fiber is the same. Not at all. There are lots of different types of fibers. So your friend may say, well, how can I get a good fiber? Do you have a good fiber that you can help them with? Yes, you do. You have a very good fiber to help them with, and you say, this has been formulated just for this. Just to help bring your blood glucose under control. In fact, this will help balance your blood glucose. Now, your friend will say, okay, wonderful, thank you. Is there anything else I can do? One more effect is chlorogenic acid. You can teach your friend that there is this molecule in some plants, and this is a quote from a scientific study. This molecule has been shown to not only help bring down fasting levels of insulin and glucose, but also when someone eats glucose, it pushes down that glucose level, just like fiber does. So chlorogenic acids are acting in a similar way. Now your friend may have never even heard of chlorogenic acid, and they will say, well, how can I find some chlorogenic acid? Do you have a source, do you think? Yes, you do. You have a tool that you can help your friend with, and you can say, I have this product that has been designed called Unimate to be enriched with chlorogenic acid, and one of its benefits, among many, is going to be to help your glucose and your insulin come under control, because we are trying to balance blood glucose. Now, this is the insulin curve, and now the purple line I'm showing you is what the glucose level is looking like. So when someone eats a lot of glucose, the insulin went up, but of course the glucose went up first. And at the top, when glucose goes up, it activates glycation. And we have all of those problems that we talked about before. So when we have an average individual who's eating a lot of carbohydrates all the time, their blood glucose levels are going crazy all day long. That is a term called glycemic variability. And this is high glycemic variability. Those levels of glucose go really high and then really low. The more a person has glucose levels that are going like that, the more risk they have of heart disease, of cancers, of Alzheimer's disease, depression, diabetes, and many more. So you are telling your friend, we cannot have glucose coming up and down all day long. We need to take these big spikes And with a little bit of balance and a little unomate, you can bring that under control. You can start to take the highs and the lows and start to press them down. Remember, this is not even changing the diet. You can balance blood glucose better by using these two tools to help your friend feel great. Okay, so that was all step one. That was the first part of this process. Balance blood glucose. Fiber in balance helps bring it down. The chlorogenic acid in unomate also brings it down. They both work, and they work by two different mechanisms, so they work together very well. Now you tell your friend the benefit of fasting. Remember, globally, over 70% of all calories are coming from carbohydrates. That means that we have blood glucose levels that are going up all the time. In fact, if you are looking at the insulin levels of someone, most people start their day with a very high sugary breakfast. Then after they've had breakfast, because they've spiked their insulin, they get hungry, then they have a snack. Then they have a big carbohydrate heavy lunch. Then they have an afternoon snack. Then they have a big dinner. And then last of all, before they go to bed, they eat more sweets and more junk food, more carbohydrates. So they're spending every waking moment in a state of elevated insulin. And too much insulin causes insulin resistance. So we need to help the friend wipe that off. Just get rid of all of these insulin and glucose spikes all day. And frequently fasting makes that better. And the easiest way to fast is just to take out one meal. Just help your friend learn to take out one meal in the day. And let's say it's breakfast, for example. Now, insulin is able to stay low all morning long, and it helps their body be more insulin sensitive. But your friend may say to you, as you are teaching them the benefits of fasting, they may say, but fasting is so hard. I don't want to fast, it's uncomfortable. How can we make it easier? But before we go to that, I want to just ask, why is fasting so difficult? I think if you can understand this, then you can help your friend learn to fast more easily. Well, from a metabolic scientist, I think there are two important things when it comes to why fasting gets so hard. One reason is cravings. The second reason is hunger. Those are not the same. Those are not the same thing. Cravings is when you have no reason to eat. You're not hungry at all, but you just want something. Hunger is when your tummy is rumbling and you just want to get something in your stomach. They're not the same. Let's talk about cravings first. And what do humans crave? What are the foods that if we are sitting down on a Saturday night and we're going to watch a TV show or a movie, what is it that we want to go eat? Remember, there are the three macronutrients: fats, proteins, and carbs. Humans have no addiction, no cravings to pure fat. No one is sitting down to watch a movie and they want to eat a stick of butter. It does not happen. So humans have no cravings for fat. Similarly, humans have no cravings for protein. I wish we did. Life would be so much easier. We would all be so much more metabolically healthy. But no one sits down on a Saturday night to turn on a movie and wants egg whites or just straight whey protein. No one. The one macronutrient that humans have a craving or even an addiction for is carbohydrates. There is an entire body of literature of published evidence showing that it's refined starches and especially sugar that we start to crave. That's what we want. When we sit down on a Saturday night and turn on a movie on the TV, it's something usually sweet and gooey, or it is salty and crunchy, and both of those are going to be based on carbohydrates. That's what we crave. Now, how can we help? If our mouths taste something that is bitter, it actually tricks our brain. And it tells our brain, hey, you don't crave that junk food actually. You don't need that junk food. So a bitter taste can turn down the sweet cravings. But how do we get the bitter taste? Where can some of these bitter tastes come from? If you know that bitter will help turn off the sweet cravings, how can we find something bitter? Well, there are two molecules that exist in nature that are known to be what's called bitter tastants. So when we taste them in our mouth, it activates these bitter taste receptors. They are molecules called theobromine and saponins. I bet you've heard of them before. And you're going to teach your friend about theobromine and saponins. And you're going to say, when your friend says, it's so hard for me to fast because I'm always craving candy or ice cream or something, you say you need to put something bitter in your mouth. And there are these things called theobromine and saponin that can help. And then your friend will say, well, I don't know what those are. Where can I get them? You have an answer. You say you can get them from Unomate. I already gave you some. And when you're craving something sweet, take some of this. Put it in your mouth. Mix a drink and drink it. And swish it around your mouth. And it can help tell your brain, I don't need that sweetness. So that's one way you can help your friend learn to fast more frequently, by helping them learn to control their cravings. Now, separate from cravings, as I said earlier, is hunger. Hunger is very, very tricky. It's very hard to understand hunger. One way to understand hunger is to look at what happens to blood glucose levels. When blood glucose levels go very, very high, that's a problem because we have glycation and we have lots of insulin. But the problem isn't over because when blood glucose goes very high very quickly, it usually comes down very quickly and often it will go too low. When blood glucose has gone up and now gone very low, that's called rebound hypoglycemia. Sorry, translators. So there's this low point of glucose after the blood glucose has gone very, very high. And when blood glucose dips too low, it makes the brain get very worried. The brain gets upset because it thinks the body is starting to run out of energy, and so it triggers our hunger. So one way to help control hunger is to never let our blood glucose levels go very high. So here is something you can remember, and you teach this to your friend. Avoid the highs to prevent the lows. And if you can prevent the low, you can prevent hunger. When someone eats a breakfast that spikes glucose very, very high, they shouldn't be hungry 2 hours later. They have plenty of energy, plenty of food. Why are they hungry? It's because their blood glucose went too high and now it went too low. So, to prevent the lows, avoid the highs. Now, how can we do that? It's the same tools we talked about. For example, fiber. Fiber is a very, very good way to prevent the glucose from going up so high. And so you lower it down. Now the blood glucose levels won't go as high, and if they don't go as high, that means they will not drop as low. It will settle down more nicely, and it will help prevent hunger. Okay, now you tell your friend that balance can help prevent the highs to avoid the lows, and they can control hunger a little better. You're not done yet. Because then you tell your friends, but do you know what, friend? When you take balance, not only do you control your blood sugar and prevent it from going low, but the fiber, when it comes into the stomach, into the intestines, it starts to make the bacteria in our intestines start to make short chain fats. So the bacteria are eating the fiber, which is very good for the bacteria. It's a very good food for the bacteria. The bacteria are eating the fiber and then turning it into short chain fats. Now, the short chain fats get into the blood, they go to the brain, and they tell the brain, we don't need to eat. We have lots of energy. So it's another way for balance to help tell the brain that the body is okay, that we don't need to be hungry. Now, let's come back to the bitter tastants. You'll recall a moment ago I talked about the bitter tastants, theobromine and saponins, and how they can help reduce cravings. But now we're talking about hunger. Did you know that you also have bitter taste receptors in your intestines? That you drink some Unomate and you taste the bitter in your mouth. But also, as it comes through your intestines can taste it as well. And when those bitter taste receptors are turned on in your intestines, it tells the brain, we don't need to eat. It reduces appetite. So this is one entirely new way to help your friend learn to control hunger. When they're learning how to fast, just a little bit, and the fasting gets a little uncomfortable, you now have these two tools to help them both control their cravings and control their hunger. And when they do this, then they can fast better. All right, now I'm not done talking about this hunger idea. One of the things that I love teaching the most at my university is a class all about hormones. Did you know that one of the most active hormone-producing tissues of the body is actually the intestines? It's not the thyroid, it's not the adrenal glands above the kidneys, it's the intestines. Our intestines are capable of producing dozens of hormones. About 50 or 60 hormones come from in our guts. But the most famous, I bet you've heard of it, is called GLP-1. GLP-1 is a hormone that is released from the intestines. One of the reasons it's become so famous is because of what it does at our stomach and our brain. When GLP-1 comes to the stomach, it makes food stay in the stomach a little longer. And by making the food stay in the stomach a little longer, we're a little less hungry. We don't want to eat as much. At the same time, when GLP-1 goes to the brain, it tells the brain that we don't need to eat. It makes the brain tell the body that we're full, that we have better satiety. We're not hungry. We're not as hungry as much. So the collective effect, by going to the stomach and by going to the brain, is telling the body we don't need to eat. Hunger goes down. In fact, this works so well that now we have drugs that are designed to act like GLP-1. Have you heard of the drugs Ozempic and Wegovy? I bet you have. In fact, I bet you know people, I bet you have friends, maybe even some of you, are taking these drugs because they work. A person will have almost no appetite. They never want to eat, and so naturally they lose weight. However, that form of weight loss has some negative consequences. Here was a study that was published just a couple years ago, and they found that with weight loss, with these drugs, up to 40% of the weight these people were losing was coming from their lean mass. That means potentially for every 10 kilograms a person was losing, 4 kilograms was coming from tissues like their muscle and their bones. That is a lot. And only 6 kilograms was actually coming from their fat. So 40% of the weight loss on these drugs, depending on the people, could be coming from their lean mass, their fat-free mass. That is very, very difficult. We don't want to lose muscle and bone, especially as we get older. Now, it's interesting to see what happens when these people don't want to take the drug anymore. In fact, studies in Europe and in the United States finds that about 70% of people that are on these drugs stop taking them after they've been on it for 2 years. After 2 years, the patient doesn't want to take it anymore. It's not the doctor who makes them stop, it's the patient who stops taking it. They don't like feeling sick in their stomach anymore. They don't like that their muscles and their bones are going away because the doses of the drugs are just so high. So 70% of people stop taking it. And what happens, do you think, to their weight loss when they stop taking it? Well, all the weight they lost starts to come back immediately. Now, in this study that you see here that was just published, you can see, well, Professor Bigman, they went down, then 1 year later, within 1 year they had gained back. They were within about 5 kilograms. However, if they keep going, the weight keeps going up. And it gets closer and closer and closer until there's no difference between them anymore. But even if they keep some weight off, what do we gain back? Now, what do I mean by that? Remember, 40% of the weight a person loses on these drugs is coming from lean mass, like their muscle or their bone. So they're losing 6 kilograms of fat, they're losing 4 kilograms of lean mass, which comes back very, very quickly, and which doesn't. The problem with this result is that fat comes back very easily, whereas muscle and bone sometimes won't come back at all, depending on how old the person is. And it's harder in women to gain that muscle and bone back than it is in men. And so as an actual percent of their body, the person is still maybe 5 kilograms less, but they're probably actually fatter than they were before they ever started taking the drug. This is important because if you are talking to your friend and your friend is on the drug or they're curious about the drug, you just say, usually people stop taking the drug at 2 years because they just feel sick all the time. And when they do stop taking the drug, they gain all of their weight back. But maybe not the muscle and bone. That may be gone for good. Okay, now your friend may then say, all right, well, you just told me that GLP-1 is good. It will help me control my hunger better. But these drugs, which have too much GLP-1, I don't want to do those. They're expensive or will make me lose my muscle and my bone. How can I get the benefits of GLP-1 without having to take these drugs? You have an answer. You can tell them, actually, Unimate imbalance can help your intestines produce more GLP-1. And then I bet they will ask you, how? How can these things be so good? You keep telling me that they're so good. How can it even help with GLP-1? First, fiber from balance will come into the intestines and it will activate these type of cells that are called L cells. And when L cells are activated, the L cells will produce more GLP-1. So the fiber from balance will specifically activate those cells, increasing the GLP-1 in a person's blood. And it's their own GLP-1, and they're increasing it naturally. So it's a good effect, and it will help control hunger. Also, you're not done. You will say there are 2 molecules called chlorogenic acid and ferulic acid. When the intestines see chlorogenic acid and ferulic acid, it will increase GLP-1 naturally. And once again, your friend would say, how can I get those molecules? And you have a perfect source in Unimate to give them. Now, one of the best things about Unicity is that they know how to pick very good scientists. But also, they like to support research. And Unicity wanted my lab to look at what would happen in the metabolic health with Unimate. And we published an entire paper. One result that we had from that work was to see that GLP-1, in the experiments with more Unimate, GLP-1 went up by about double. It went up by about 2 times in the blood. So this is a very real effect. If your friend is interested in GLP-1 and interested in the weight loss drugs that increase GLP-1, you can tell them, I have something that you should try first. And that would be the Feel Great system. Because you can say, I heard it from a metabolic scientist all the way from America, and he showed us this evidence, because this is from my own lab. So, that brings us to the end. We have the metabolic problem, where because of what we eat, because of how frequently we eat it, we have too much insulin, and that we have too much glucose. This is creating a metabolic storm. And we see this happening around the whole world. People who are experiencing more diabetes, it's because of these problems. People who are experiencing more depression, in many instances, it's because of these problems. Their infertility, their fatty liver disease, their heart disease, their high blood pressure, all of these have one thing in common. They're consequences of this metabolic storm that we are all living in. Now, as much as the problem seems scary, and you're going to teach this to your friends, the solution is so simple. Even though sometimes it's not very easy, the solution is simple, which is we simply need to flip them around. If we can bring insulin down by bringing glucose down. What is a metabolic storm then becomes really part of the metabolic solution, and metabolic health is improved. And as I said, it's simple, but that does not mean it's easy. You need to be very kind to your friends when you're telling them these ideas, and they're telling you how hard it is to control what they eat, how hard it is to take a break from food. You come back to these two simple ideas. We need to balance your glucose a little better. That will help control your cravings, that will help control your hunger, it will help control your insulin, it will help reduce your glycation. At the same time, we need to help you learn how to take a break so you don't feel like you have to eat all the time. We are eating ourselves to death, and learning how to fast is key to improving metabolic health. And they still may say, but it is so hard for me to balance my glucose. It is so hard for me to fast frequently. You have the tools to help your friends and your loved ones to feel great. Thank you so much for letting me be your professor. Thank you. Thank you.
Please give a big round.
University Scientific Advisory Board, Dr. Aaron Glynn.
It is a great honor and pleasure to be back with my Unicity family here in Thailand. I am so thankful I have this opportunity to serve on the advisory board and continue being a part of the great work Unicity is doing around the world. I'm going to talk today about yerba mate. But first, I want to introduce you to my mom. My mom was a teacher, a mother to 4 girls, a loving wife, and a master class in patience, grace, love, and joy. She was my biggest supporter and a huge part of my success in life. She couldn't wait to come visit me when I moved to Utah in 2020 for my new job, Vice President of Research and Development for Unicity International. But just 2 weeks after I started my role with Unicity, my mom passed away unexpectedly. I didn't get to say goodbye, but she knew I loved her, and I knew she loved me. When you lose someone you love, there's always grief, right? For me, grief came in the form of lots of tears, a reduction in healthy habits like eating well and exercising. It manifested as days I didn't want to go to bed, or work, or see people. My friends, my family, even my new Unicity family were all very supportive during this time. But aside from that, I had another tool that really helped me, and that was Unimate. This is a very true story, and it's why I have such a strong belief in this product today. For me, Unimate helped me show up on days I didn't want to. It helped me keep my weight under control and maintain my health even when I wasn't practicing the best health habits. It gave me a mood boost and helped me focus at work. It was a small thing I looked forward to every day. Unimate is experiential, right? It's something you feel the very first time you take it, and it's something that you keep coming back for day after day because you like the way it makes you feel. People's experience with a product matters. I know my story is just one of thousands from people who are benefiting from Unimate every day. It's important for you to find your story, how Unimate has helped you or a loved one. What experiences connect you to the power of this product? Experience matters, and people have been experiencing the benefits of yerba mate, the key ingredient in Unimate, for hundreds of years. Yerba mate, or Ilex paraguayensis, is a plant native to a region in South America. It includes parts of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay. And the leaves and stems from this shrub have long been prized and consumed in these cultures as a hot beverage shared in the traditional board amongst friends and family as a form of bonding. This tradition is based on ancient wisdom, the collective knowledge passed through generations that drinking an infusion of this plant increases energy, stamina, endurance, focus, and alertness. It's been touted as a digestive aid, an appetite suppressant, and a reliever of stress and inflammation in the body. There are numerous examples of civilizations discovering the power of plants long before modern science could explain the why. White willow bark was known by ancient Egyptians and Greeks to reduce pain and improve outcomes during illness or injury. Modern science later identified the compound salicin in the bark, which is a precursor to modern aspirin. You may know aspirin is a widely used medication to reduce fever, inflammation, and pain in the body. Turmeric root has been used for thousands of years in Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine. Modern science now knows that turmeric contains curcuminoids, very potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory molecules. Humans have tapped into the power of plants for thousands of years. Those experiences get passed through generations, and experiences build belief. And yet, some seek validation by modern science. They want to know the why behind these effects. For yerba mate, modern science has identified many compounds that drive the experience people feel and experience when they drink an infusion of this leaves. So those are the chlorogenic acids, theobromine, caffeine, and unique bitter compounds called mate saponins that Dr. Bickman mentioned earlier. We call these compounds that have positive actions in our body bioactives. But another thing modern science has revealed about plants like yerba mate, coffee, and tea is that there are many factors that can affect the bioactive profile from that plant. Growing conditions like altitude, temperature, precipitation, soil, harvesting season, and even processing after harvest can affect which bioactives are present and in what amounts. When you consume a natural product like coffee or tea, you really don't know how much of those bioactive compounds from the plant you're getting. Studies show the amount of these beneficial compounds like chlorogenic acids, other polyphenols, antioxidants can vary widely across different samples and preparations. We know roasting coffee beans reduces the chlorogenic acid content by half. And processing methods by other commercially available yerba mate drinks can greatly reduce the chlorogenic acid content. In fact, we found Unimate has about 20 times more of these important bioactive compounds than other options on the market. That is why process matters. To ensure we deliver a consistent, high-quality product every time that we know is going to be enriched in the right amounts of these bioactive compounds that target metabolic health. At Unicity, we've spent years optimizing our BioSelect process, a proprietary process that standardizes the production of Unimate in 5 key steps, from the selection of which leaves are harvested in South America, all the way to our ultra-concentrated end product. This is really important for people to understand. This process and the resulting ingredient we obtain at the end of the process are what sets Unicity and Unimate apart from our competitors. Let's look at the importance of each step. It starts with the yerba mate leaves. We know the quality of the starting material is critical to the end product. Our yerba mate is shade grown under natural canopies in the forest or in carefully restored areas. When the time is right, every 1 to 3 years, we hand select and harvest only the mature leaves from the plant, leaving the existing yerba mate plants intact. That's really important. This process is highly sustainable. It helps to support both traditional cultural practices and protect vital forest ecosystems that are native to this region. Once harvested, how the material is processed in these early stages is also very important. We have a 2-step drying process that was designed to preserve the bioactive compounds we want while eliminating undesired components from the raw material. So we flash heat the leaves at a very high temperature, and this deactivates enzymes in the yerba mate leaves that would otherwise start to degrade our bioactive compounds over time. This flash heating also works to kill off any harmful microorganisms that might contaminate the final product. But because this step is so fast, flash heating, the heat doesn't reach the inside of the leaves and deactivate our compounds of interest, the chlorogenic gases and those other compounds we just talked about. So we call this step bioactive preservation because it's critical to preserving those important bioactive compounds in our yerba mate leaves. Next, our yerba mate is aged for several months, and this aging process has been shown to increase the levels of bioactive compounds and increase the antioxidant activity of the leaves. This aging process also contributes to the final taste and color of the product, which is one reason why Unimate tastes so much better than other yerba mates you may have tried. Lastly, this dried and aged yerba mate is milled into a fine powder that will be used for our extraction process. This milling is also a really important step because it allows us to extract higher amounts of those bioactive compounds we want. So at this stage, our leaf material is finally ready for extraction and concentration. There are different ways you can perform extraction on botanicals, but water only is the purest and cleanest way to do that. It's also most in line with the traditional use of yerba mate, how it's traditionally consumed in these cultures, water only, extracting those beneficial compounds. Unicity has fine-tuned a water, gentle-based extraction that creates this natural extract without the potential for harmful chemical residues that it can exist in other chemically based extraction processes like ethanol extraction that you may have heard of. After extraction, our products go through a three-stage filtration process that further concentrates all of those beneficial compounds we're looking for. And then our quality team at Unicity rigorously tests each batch to ensure it meets threshold or minimum levels of these bioactive compounds before it goes into Unimate. The resulting ultra-pure extract is enriched with those key bioactives from yerba mate. They're specifically tailored for metabolic health. Chlorogenic acids, theobromine, caffeine, and the mate sap. Process matters. It's how we guarantee the potency of bioactives in every serving of Unimate, and how we know each batch is going to be effective. If you knew a certain amount of a medicine would make something better, would you settle for a lesser dose or an option that could have widely varying amounts of that beneficial compound? No, you would want to know that you were getting the effective dose of the beneficial compound consistently. Imagine how different people's experiences would be with Unimate if we didn't have the process. One batch, they might feel amazing after drinking Unimate. Another batch, they might have no effects. This is what you're getting with coffee and other yerba mate products on the market. Unknown quality and unknown potency. With Unimate, you're getting a standardized product every time that's going to be consistent. Experience matters, process matters. To me, there's one more thing that matters when it comes to Unimate, and that is the science. There are hundreds of research articles on the benefits of yerba mate, but there are thousands of research articles on the benefits of the most abundant polyphenol in Unimate, the chlorogenic acids. If you hear people talk about the benefits of drinking coffee, they'll say things like, drinking coffee lowers your risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers, and your risk of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. But how? What have scientists attributed those benefits of coffee to? It's the chlorogenic acids, and guess what? Unimate has about 10 times more chlorogenic acids than coffee on average. Remember I told you how growing conditions, processing, and preparation can affect the bioactives in these extracts? The chlorogenic acids are very sensitive to this, and they're degraded by heat. So the process of roasting coffee greatly decreases the chlorogenic acids in coffee. We say Unimate has 10 times more chlorogenic acids than coffee because that's based on an average, the average amount in published literature on coffee. But we've tested some samples of coffee that have no chlorogenic acids. So this just goes back to the point. If you are not testing for and standardizing these important bioactive compounds, you have no idea how much you're getting, and therefore no idea if you'll get effects and benefits from that product. The chlorogenic acids are actually a group of related compounds. They have really long, complicated names that we don't need to talk about. But we call this group chlorogenic acids. And they've been extensively studied in the scientific literature. They show benefits on fat metabolism, insulin sensitivity, blood sugar levels, weight control, blood pressure, and strong anti-inflammatory and antioxidant activities. In fact, the majority of benefits we can attribute to these chlorogenic acids are because they are such potent antioxidants. Why are antioxidants important? If you were here 2 years ago, you may remember me talking about how our bodies are constantly generating these damaging molecules called reactive oxygen species, or ROS. These are a product of normal metabolism, but they can increase when we have an immune response, we're exposed to air pollution, or we're stressed. These ROS go around causing damage in the body, and they activate inflammation. We call the damage these ROS create oxidative stress. So more ROS means oxidative stress and accumulation of damage and inflammation in the body. And oxidative stress is implicated in all sorts of conditions and diseases, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, decline of brain function, and the process of aging in general. Antioxidants neutralize the ROS that cause oxidative stress, which can help alleviate all of those problems oxidative stress is causing. Just to give you another example of this, ROS can oxidize LDL cholesterol. This oxidized LDL cholesterol contributes to atherosclerosis, where plaque builds up in your arteries, in your blood vessels, and damages the blood vessels. This contributes to cardiovascular disease. So oxidative stress and oxidized LDL can work together, and they can also cause inflammation. In one way, inflammation is a healthy response in our body. It's the body's defense mechanism against injury, infection, or other harmful stimuli. An acute or short-term inflammatory response is an immediate response to a cut or to some injury in your body. This is going to eventually heal, and that short-term inflammation goes away. We can also have long-term inflammation. This is a lower level immune response that can last for weeks, months, or even years. And this is the type of inflammation that's harmful. It can be caused by many factors: environmental toxins, lifestyle factors like lack of exercise, poor diet, stress, and even that oxidative stress that we talked about. So the chlorogenic acids work by activating antioxidant protective mechanisms that neutralize the ROS and thereby reduce oxidative stress. They block inflammation signaling pathways, reducing the production of damaging inflammatory molecules you may have heard of, like TNF-alpha, IL-6, and CRP. And a third important way the chlorogenic acids work is through this pathway called AMPK. This is an enzyme, an important energy sensor in our cells. AMPK is typically activated when our cellular energy is low. So this would be times like during exercise or during fasting. So activation of AMPK is generally a good thing. It stimulates glucose uptake and fat metabolism. It increases our use of fat for fuel, and it reduces cholesterol and the synthesis of new fats. AMPK activation results in enhanced insulin sensitivity and glucose uptake in our muscles. It promotes the process of autophagy in our cells. It activates our mitochondria, the powerhouse of our cells. And it can also reduce inflammatory signaling pathways. So by affecting these three major processes in the body, chlorogenic acids have wide-ranging benefits on human health. Energy pathways like fat burning and blood sugar control are improved through AMPK. Reduction of oxidative stress and inflammation through those antioxidant effects is why these compounds are also so beneficial for neurons and brain health. Less damage to the neurons in our brain as we age means lower risk of cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, and other neurodegenerative conditions. Reduced inflammation long-term is also going to help with insulin sensitivity. So the chlorogenic acids are doing lots of good things for our health, and we have a lot of them concentrated in Unimate. Like the chlorogenic acids, the saponins found in mate, they're also a group of compounds. Different plants can have different types of saponins, but the type in your mate are called mate saponins. And these particular saponins have been shown to have anti-inflammatory, cholesterol lowering, antioxidant, immune boosting, and antimicrobial actions. They're also very bitter, like Dr. Bickman just mentioned, bitter compounds that can help reduce cravings for the sweet taste. These saponins can have many effects throughout the body, but to highlight two, they work to block pro-inflammatory signaling pathways in the cells, and therefore reduce the release of cytokines that are pro-inflammatory, that cause inflammation, like TNF-alpha and IL-6. They've also been shown to reduce cholesterol, and they do this in two ways. First, they can bind directly to cholesterol in our digestive tract and prevent it from being absorbed. So that's going to help in one way keep cholesterol lower. The second way is that they can bind bile acids in the digestive tract and prevent them from being reabsorbed. So bile is something that we secrete during digestion. It helps us absorb fat. And those bile acids are made from cholesterol. The body normally likes to reuse and recycle those bile acids. But when some of them are blocked from being reabsorbed because the saponins are blocking them, the body has to use cholesterol to make more bile acids, and over time that helps lower cholesterol levels. Two other important compounds we isolate and concentrate in Unimate are theobromine and caffeine. Now these two have very similar chemical structures. Theobromine is actually a metabolite of caffeine, so some of the caffeine you ingest gets turned into theobromine. You'll also find theobromine in cacao, dark chocolate, some teas, and of course, yerba mate. The effects of caffeine itself are pretty well known, right? It increases energy, boosts mood, enhances focus, and can suppress appetite. And theobromine is going to have a lot of those same effects, but because of the small differences in structure between caffeine and theobromine, theobromine takes longer to be absorbed by the body, and its effects tend to be longer lasting. So what does this mean? It means you'll get a lot of those same benefits that you get with caffeine, but a little more relaxed, without the spike, without the jitters that you can get with caffeine. Theobromine is known as the feel-good compound in chocolate. So combining theobromine with the naturally occurring caffeine that we have in yerba mate and Unimate results in the benefits of both compounds, but without the jitters, without the crash. So it's that calm sense of focus you get when you take Unimate. That's from the combination of these two. And like the saponins, these are also both very bitter compounds. So drinking them is going to help reduce those sweet cravings that we've already talked about. These are the four main bioactives we isolate and concentrate in Unimate, and they drive the benefits that people feel and experience from our products. I want to pull in one other point from Dr. Bickman's presentation. He talked about glycation. Chronically high blood sugar levels lead to more glycation, more sugar molecules attaching to and damaging proteins and other things in our body. And glycation generates these advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. AGEs in turn promote both inflammation and oxidative stress. So all of these processes are interconnected, and none are good for our metabolic or long-term health. We all have glycation happening in our bodies right now. We all have those ROS that cause oxidative stress and damage in our cells. And we all have some level of inflammation happening in our body. None of these processes are diseases themselves, but they can all drive or exacerbate chronic conditions and diseases like insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, arthritis, Alzheimer's, and so on. Aging is just the accumulation of damage from these processes over a lifetime. These processes are inevitable, but we do have some control over how much damage they cause in our body. If you think about why most products and health programs fail, it's because they address a very narrow focus in a complex web of metabolism. Human diseases are the result of complex, interconnected dysfunctions within the body, particularly metabolic disease. Each of these processes cause damage in our body: glycation, inflammation, and oxidative stress. Again, not diseases themselves, but they are all processes that underlie poor metabolic health. The compounds that we are isolating and concentrating in Unimate work to block or reduce glycation, inflammation, and oxidative stress. This synergy of compounds in Unimate are getting at those underlying root causes of health conditions versus targeting a single narrow focus further in the process. So what do I want you to take away from my talk today? I hope you have the ability to share about the power of Unimate in these three key areas: your personal experience with the product, our important BioSelect process that standardizes the production of Unimate so you know you're getting an effective product every single time you take it, and the science. What are those 4 key compounds we concentrate in Unimate and how they affect those processes of glycation, inflammation, and oxidative stress that contribute to aging and all aspects of health. Yerba mate is so much more than just a plant that grows in South America. It's a community ritual, an ancient wisdom, and modern science. And we take all of the best aspects of yerba mate and put them into Unimate. Unimate is a tool to take people from where they are in this moment to where they want to be with their health. We all know people who are struggling. They might want to improve their health, but they don't know where to start. Or maybe they're like I was 4 years ago, and they're going through a hard time. They just need something to be that easy first step on their journey to better health. The tradition of yerba mate is to share it with friends, old and young. What an awesome opportunity we have, and a gift to be able to share Unimate with others. Thank you, friends, for sharing this time with me.
Thank you, Dr. Erin Glynn.
Thank you. Wow, it's good to be here. It's good to be in Bangkok. Sawadee-ka. Always feels like coming home. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about what makes Unicity different and special in this state of Unicity message, and what sets us apart in the business world. Now, at Unicity, we operate on a fundamentally different time scale than most companies. Most of the business world today is caught up in this frenetic and myopic race for short-term results. This kind of short-term thinking limits investing in the future. And I want to tell you what we're focusing on to avoid that kind of thinking. Now consider the landscape. On the one hand, you have public companies, publicly traded companies. All they care about is their next quarter financial results, because that's what determines their bonuses and their executive compensation. So they make decisions often to maximize that short-term quarterly gain that will mortgage the future of the company and the future of their innovation. On the other hand, we have private equity companies. They are very focused on cutting costs, leveraging up the balance sheet with debt, and racing towards a quick exit. Now, this is usually 3 to 5 years, and it can be very beneficial for the investors, but it can come at a long-term cost for the company, for the sustainability and the stability of the company. So this is why we see a lot of the sameness in the industry today. Because this kind of short-term thinking doesn't result in something unique or new. It often results in driving down the cost and the quality of the product. So that's why we see almost all of these products that you see in the grocery store on the shelves are made by the same handful of companies. So they made this business model where they repackage the cheapest industrial ingredients into different unhealthy, typically products which are designed to hack your brain to consume more of them. So while it looks like you have a lot of choice when you go shopping, actually it's just the same stuff in different packages, different prices, different brands, but it's the same inside. Take coffee as one example. You may not know it, but all the coffee shops you see, all the different brands in the store, 80% are from 3 companies. This is one German company. They own all of these different brands. It's actually just the same company, same product. They have a simple playbook. They buy up all the companies they can in a space. They use the market power to drive out competition. They use the buying power to lower the cost of ingredients, these industrial crops. And they try to make it as addictive as possible with adding sugar. And then eventually they will sell out. It's been done many times and it's extremely effective in the short term. And that's why it's been used. But it's not just in these food products where this short-term thinking occurs. I saw this firsthand many years ago, 15 plus years ago, when I was a design engineer at Boeing. So Boeing is one of the great American companies, but it was taken over by this short-term thinking. The people making decisions, they didn't have much interest in the product. They were really focused on the numbers on the spreadsheet, maximizing the return on investment for the next quarter. So this is very serious, right? We are flying in these airplanes. We don't care about the earnings per share. We care if the airplane's going to land safely. It's also had devastating effect from the food perspective with our health. You see this from 1980 to 2015, the increase in obesity and diabetes. Because this short-term thinking to maximize consumption of these very cheap industrial crops has had this very bad effect on our environment. A lot of people feel like it's their fault that they have bad health. Actually, it's the environment they're in. They think they have many choices, but they don't. Because when the only objective is maximizing the short-term financial gain, we have to make withdrawals from this bank of human health. There's another bank that we've been making withdrawals from, and that's the bank of ecological resources. So many of these crops, coffee is one example, require a lot of deforestation. They also require huge amounts of chemical fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides in order to maximize the productivity of that ground. So again, when we focus on the short term, there's a cost. We call this thinking spreadsheet brain. We want to avoid this. Now, how are we doing that at Unicity? This is what we are focusing on. We are not just building a company, we're building a legacy, we're building a family. We're laying the groundwork for a business that can provide sustainability and stability, not just for us today, but for future generations. Rather than the short-term numbers, we're focused on our people and our relationships, product innovation and manufacturing excellence, digital and physical infrastructure, and financial prudence. And I'll go through each of these. This long-term thinking influences everything we do, from our approach to product innovation and development, to our financial strategies, to the way we value and invest in people. It allows us to make decisions which we believe will yield tremendous value in the future. So I'll walk through each of these. You'll see how this approach not only differentiates from our competitors, but it also gives us an advantage in a way that other companies can't match. So first, the people-centric approach. We've always been a company that primarily invests in people. We really believe that it is our relationships with our team, our partners, our customers, that is what is really important. We recognize that it's you, the distributors, that make this company value, and you are the reason we do this. And we demonstrate this through our actions and through our investments. We absolutely love the way we do business, and we're 100% committed to doing that and to being the best partner that we can be. Your success is our success. When we see you up here on the stage tomorrow and today, we feel as happy and as proud as if it was us on the stage. We're really fully committed to seeing each of you up here. When our customers have success with their health, it's also our success. We love it. If you succeed alone, we have a word for that. That's called failure. We want to succeed together. Now, one of our unique strengths is our global presence. We operate in 42 different countries. We speak, as a company, 36 or more languages. This presents a lot of unique challenges and also a lot of amazing opportunities. We navigate some complex regulatory environments and some different cultural contexts, market conditions. Our strength lies in our ability to learn from each other and apply successful strategies globally. So this global presence enables a really good cross-pollination of ideas. We facilitate knowledge transfer between our global markets, and the most important part of that is we want to listen and learn. Our next focus is our product development, R&D and product development. So we maintain full control of the intellectual property and our production. While this takes a huge investment, and it's a very long-term return on that investment, it enables those compounding gains over time. We're continuously working on improving our products. This strategy involves some really deep integration in our supply chain, which I'll go into. Now, we have a lot of smart scientists. You've heard from some of them. There's a lot more that are working on our products. It's important, I should note that all the images I'm showing, they're not stock photos. These are real people. This is real equipment, real products. So I apologize, some of these photos are not high quality. A lot of them I took with my phone. But these are real people and they really care about these things. Yeah, they're great. Now, of course, you can't just build great products in a lab or in an office. We have to get deep into the supply chain. So we know where our ingredients come from that go into our products. We also know where the trees are that those ingredients grew on. We know where those trees were germinated, and we also know where is the parent tree of that tree. So this is real. We actually have a genealogy on the trees that are growing our ingredients for our products. So these pictures are this is in southern Brazil where we get our mate leaves. And again, I didn't just Google for an image of the rainforest. This is real. You're looking at the trees where our Unimate is sourced. It's beautiful. It looks like Jurassic Park. The reason it looks like Jurassic Park, actually, this is interesting. These trees you see are not yerba mate. The yerba mate grows in the shade of these trees. What you see is, it's a tree called Araucaria cristifolia, and it's a tree that's older than the dinosaurs. It's critically endangered right now due to deforestation. But where we grow the yerba mate, it's very beneficial because those trees that grow in the shade, they have to produce more bioactive compounds. So where we grow our products, these trees are carefully protected. So you can be assured that when we produce our products, we are not only making a fantastic product, we're also protecting and stewarding the environment where we grow it. So Unimate is a great example. Many other products are similar. Our commitment to deep product knowledge goes beyond the field all the way to the final product and beyond that. We have a dedicated lab working just on botanical extracts and process improvement and the analysis of results. They've actually filed for 2 new patents on Unimate this year. And we are continuously working to improve our packaging, our blending, all of our processes. And this level of control and checking how the results are allows us to develop new technologies and stay ahead of competition and bring great products to market. Now you may have heard that it's easy to make a prototype, but it's very hard to scale that up to full-scale manufacturing. And this is true. This is the real challenge. It's also the real benefit, because when I say we want to keep our intellectual property, we want to keep control of our product, you can't do that if you develop a product and then you have to hire somebody else to make it for you. So that is why we've decided to invest a huge amount in making our products ourselves. It's very difficult, and that's why you see almost every other brand you see, they never made the product. They outsourced it to somebody else. So we've made the decision to invest in this equipment, these factories, and the people and technical know-how. A big reason for that is we gain massive amounts of experience and product information from being involved in this manufacturing production. One of the rules that I made is that all of our managers, people who are engaged in product development, they have to work in the factory. They have to work a shift every month in these factories. The reason for that is they can avoid that spreadsheet brain by being hands-on with the product and coming in close contact with the people who are making it, our manufacturing experts. We've had a lot of important process improvements from this and from being engaged in it, and I think there'll be a lot more. Now, our approach to digital and physical infrastructure follows a similar line. We made a strategic decision to build a lot of our software in-house rather than buying some off-the-shelf solution. And that's been very challenging, but we're starting to see some big results and big possibilities ahead of us. For example, a couple of months ago, we made a major upgrade on some of our back-end servers. And the performance and stability has been amazing. We used to have, I'm sorry about this, we used to have 5 to 7 crashes per day on some of these servers. And we've had 0 in 60 days since we upgraded. We used to have 5 people continuously engaged in keeping these processes running, and now we can let these guys work on other important projects. Our average time to resolve an issue globally used to be 7 days. And again, I'm sorry for that. Now it's down to 3.6 hours, and we're going to keep pushing that even lower. We understand that we have a long way to go here, and we are committed to do better and to keep investing in this, because this is very important to our success. You'll notice that our IT team is here in Bangkok. They have a booth in the expo, and they'll be delighted to talk with you and to learn from you on what we can do better. Our guiding principle in digital product innovation is that we want to make you, our leaders, more powerful. We want to give you the tools to do what you can do even better and with a broader reach. If there are things that are limiting your ability to make life better, we want to fix those, and we're working on that. And we follow the same hands-on approach with physical infrastructure. We are always trying to do continuous improvement and feedback. What we found is that nobody cares as much about our products and our business as we do. So that is why we take the hands-on approach to these things. We've built and continue to improve our global logistical and financial infrastructure so that we can deliver the high-quality products, pay commissions on time everywhere we operate. And I hope this sounds simple. If it looks simple, that's great. That means we're doing our job. Now, even after making all these big investments, in product development, in manufacturing, in IT, data center, we maintain a very strong balance sheet with zero debt. This is very counterintuitive in the business world today. But it's very important. When you take money from somebody, whether it's a bank with debt or whether it's an outside investor, now you need to return to them what they paid for you. It limits your options in the future. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. There could be another pandemic. There could be huge opportunities. We want to be ready to respond to those things. We don't want to have made decisions in the past that limit what we can do in the future. So we're keeping a strong position so that we can be secure. We think the world's probably going to get crazier before it gets less crazy. Also, zero outside investors. Everybody who is invested in Unicity, you hear from them. They're engaged every day. I want to say thank you. Thank you for trusting us for managing this company for you. As I said, your success is our success. We love you and we thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel Page.
Until they are blue in the face that the human life has never been so good, never been so long. Is not that we have fewer years in our life. It's that we have less life in our years. Less life in our years. How? How did that happen? Tragically, it's nothing so innocent as a mutated virus spreading person to person. No, the real story is simpler and much more sinister. You see, in the 1980s, people began to wake up to the fact that cigarettes were harming us, that they were killing us. And so these cigarette companies began to pivot. They were sitting on the biggest piles of cash in the world. And they began to use that money to buy food companies. And they shifted their thousands of scientists to begin working on food products. And they put their government lobbyists to work in Washington, D.C., promoting a new view of what a healthy diet looked like. Does it look familiar? This food pyramid is a marketing document. It's a marketing document for ultra-processed foods. It exists to convince you that the products that they were and are creating are okay for us and okay for our children. Nothing is more profitable to big food than addicting our children to their ultra-processed foods. It's just a statement of fact. And the most tragic part about this is that they are targeting us. But does that mean that big food and its hundreds of thousands of employees is trying to kill us? No, of course not. Their goal is to make food cheaper, to make food more addictive so we buy more of it. But it is our health that gets caught in the crossfire. And this is only half the picture. The other half is the largest industry in America, maybe the world, and the fastest growing. Obviously, I'm not talking about tech or AI. I'm talking about healthcare. Our food environment has created the perfect environment for big pharma to thrive. And nothing is more profitable to them than when someone begins a lifetime medication. That diagnosis of prediabetes, or obesity, or high blood sugar is the beginning of an extremely profitable relationship for big pharma. And the tragic part of this side is that the younger that happens, the more money they will make. And so these two massive forces are what is driving the downward spiral of the life in our years. Today, 74% of Americans are obese or overweight. And 50% of children are obese or overweight. 120 years ago, doctors would write special reports on cases of obese individuals. People would go to a circus to see someone who had gained that much weight. Today, 50% of Americans have type 2 or prediabetes. And 30% of teenagers have been diagnosed with prediabetes. Just 50 years ago, no pediatrician in their career would have witnessed this. In 1950, in the US, only 1% of Americans had type 2 diabetes. Now 50% are diagnosed with pre or type 2 diabetes. Today, 18% of teenagers have fatty liver disease. That is a disease that used to only exist in late-stage alcoholics. Now, almost 1 in 5 teenagers who legally can't even purchase alcohol have this disease. 25% of American women are on antidepressants. And 26% of women have polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS. These statistics are meant to be shocking, but they should also be terrifying because they represent millions of people. People that you know. And all of it, as we learned over and over, is driven by insulin resistance. We know this, and we know the people that are dealing with it. We see them everywhere. In the more than 24 unicity markets that I have visited, I see the faces of the people who make up these statistics. Everywhere we go, we see them. In my own region of the Americas, every airport I walk through, every supermarket I enter, every restaurant I visit, I see the faces of the people who make up these statistics. People just like me and you, absorbed in their own life and dealing with their own problems, but often not even realizing how much less life they have in the years that they are living. Here we are in a room with 20,000 people from 50 different countries, and I can say with perfect confidence that every one of us knows someone impacted by one of these chronic lifestyle diseases that stems from insulin resistance. We can put it to the test right now. If you have never met someone, if you know nobody that has one of these chronic lifestyle diseases, just stand up and say yes. No one? Well, let's try the opposite then. If you do know someone, if there is someone in your life who is struggling with one of these chronic lifestyle diseases, then on the count of 3, stand up and shout yes. 1, 2, 3. Do you see the problem? How big it is? 2 months ago, I was in my office, leaning forward at my computer screen, scanning a report for who could I help become Diamond soon. A name jumped out to me of a presidential club member who's here with us today. So I pulled out my phone and gave them a call, planning to have a serious conversation about their unicity business. But even though they answered, before they could even finish saying hello, we were interrupted by the yells and screams of a toddler in the living room with them. And while trying to have our conversation, they said, "Oh, Sam, do you know the story of this kid?" I said, "No, I don't know the story of this kid." They said, "Well, let me tell you." I said, "Okay," thinking maybe after that we can start talking about your business. And they said, a couple years ago when I was beginning with Unicity, I was giving a presentation to a prospect who had insulin resistance and was suffering with PCOS. And I explained how Graet could help with that, could change her life. And when I got off the call, my daughter was standing behind me and said, "Dad, you know that I have that?" He said, "You have what, Graet?" "Yeah, it's in the cupboard." I said, "No, I have PCOS. Just a couple of days ago, my doctor was telling me I might not be able to get pregnant. 50-50 chance. And even if I do, it will probably be a high-risk pregnancy. Could I do that?" And his father said, "Of course, yes. We'll get you some." And 2 months later, his daughter, already weighing 20 pounds less, gets to give him the good news that she's pregnant. And now, today, he gets to have his calls with his regional VP interrupted by his little buddy, who will put more life into his years than anything else we could ever do. We are the Make Life Better company. It's what we do because it's what the world needs. But knowing that is not enough. You have to feel it. You have to feel it in here. Thank you.
When I was age 50, I woke up one morning about 4:30 to go to the restroom, and I had no legs. I literally fell when I tried to stand up. They were thinking MS, they didn't know what it was. They had to put me on heavy doses of steroids, and I mean heavy. And they almost killed me. I couldn't move. All I wanted to do was sleep, or just wanting to escape from it.
I was overweight, had high blood pressure, aches and pains, couldn't be as active as I wanted to be like I used to be. And as a sports dad, I wanted to be a role model for my kids. But I couldn't do that because my health was declining.
I grew up with a very, very low immune system. doctors gave me antibiotics for many years, and this destroyed my gut. My joints hurt, bones hurt, everything hurt. I had two little tiny kids. I wasn't able to be there for them. I felt guilty.
I had no ambition, no drive. I was drinking 18 beers a day, all day long. Got to a space where I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I was 255 pounds. I was getting physically sick and mentally sick.
Yo soy sobreviviente de un ataque de corazón y cuando me dio el COVID dañó todo mi sistema respiratorio y usaba de oxígeno 24/7. En ese momento en mi vida yo no podía hacer absolutamente nada. Yo pensaba que un día me iba a acostar y me iba a morir.
I didn't really know what I was stepping into, but I knew there was no looking back.
I think you have that moment where it's either this or it's this. Now what are you going to do?
Al otro día de yo haber usado las formulaciones por primera vez, yo me levanté de la cama.
I feel energetic, alive. I am able to be here for my kid.
The Feel Great system is giving me my confidence back, is giving me my health back, and it's strengthened my relationship with my kids. I feel like I'm in my 20s again.
I have more drive, more ambition. I love being active, fishing, hiking. Everything that I'm doing now is just a lot easier. Haven't had dark thoughts since I started. Haven't been sick once since I started. I've lost 75 pounds. Like I'm a completely different person.
Las bombas para el asma se fueron, me liberé de todo eso. Yo quería hacerlo todo en un mismo día, todo lo que no había hecho por un año. Y ahora mi vida es totalmente diferente.
I have more energy. I feel better about myself. I'm off all my medicine now. So I really don't know where I would be today without you listening. It changed my life.
Compañía y Unicity me dieron una oportunidad de vida.
This video is something we're going to be doing a lot of all over the world. We want to tell the story of the lives that we're changing through the Feel Great protocol. We'll be talking to you in your markets about the peoples whose lives you have changed, whose lives you have saved. And then we'll help you tell those stories through this format. We're going to take the fight to the people who have been feeding on us. We're going to take the fight to them. We're going to use media. We're going to use all of these powerful examples of our success to say, you can't stop us. But we need you to be bold. We need you to be fearless. We need you to be relentless. If someone can stop you, they will stop you. But if you are unstoppable, we win. The world wins. It's a cause worth fighting. It's a cause and a mission that's bigger than any of us individually. And we can only do it together. So I hope you felt something today. Tomorrow, we will celebrate. One of the things I love about our company is that we love to celebrate each other's success. Maybe nobody else cares, but we care. Maybe nobody else wants to celebrate your success, but we will. And that is why it's so important that you come tomorrow prepared to exercise your enthusiasm for every victory that you see happening before you. When you're cheering and enthusiastically celebrating each other's success, we grow stronger. We become unstoppable. This is the reason for these gatherings, to give you the feeling and the power to allow you to go out and stand up to the laughter and the criticism and the negativity that's all around you. You have to be stronger than it is. And together, we are. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow.